the time that people want us to be opinionated, it's very hard to do so. We can be opinionated up to a large extent to tell people you should do things this way. But we also want people to be aware that they have options to do things a different way. So we're trying to work more on those like integration points to make the communication between the services easier. So if you are deploying an app on, let's say, Google Cloud Run, which is our runtime environment, you can connect to SQL, NoSQL, Scalable, PubSub, whatever, easily, right? Without having to worry too much about how it works behind the scene. That kind of like composability is the thing that we're trying to do with Google Cloud. Firebase, to me at least, remains the developer-friendly interface. And by getting these two things kind of more tightly integrated, then you can get best of both worlds if you want.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Web Podcast. I am today's host, Danny Thompson. I am the Director of Technology at This Labs. I'm one of the co-hosts for Modern Web. And honestly, it's always great coming back every single week after week. And I'm joined by one of my other co-hosts tonight, Adam Rackis. Adam, how you doing?
I'm wonderful. How are you, Danny?
I'm here, man. I'm kind of excited because the guest today, I met him at All Things Open. And we kind of geeked out for a bit. And I was like, this could probably be a really, really good podcast episode. And so scheduling worked out really, really well, considering that we're in different time zones and continents, but it worked out really well. And so I'm proud to introduce Abdel Sghiouar, cloud developer advocate at Google. He is also the co-host of the Kubernetes Podcast by Google and a CNCF Ambassador. Abdel, how are you?
Hi, Vox. I'm good. How are you?
Hey, we're here. We're excited to be here with you. And as a quick shout out to everybody, you can find him on social media as Board Abdel, and you'll find all the links obviously in the show notes or the description of the video. So you can find him on Twitter, Blue Sky, and of course LinkedIn. So with that being said, Abdel, when we were talking, you kind of shared a lot with me in regards to number one, your journey and all the places that you've been and things that you've seen, and you. Obviously, as of right now, you stay in Sweden, but when I met you, it was North Carolina, Raleigh. So obviously, polar opposite of locations in that regard. And so I kind of wanted to kind of dive into that journey a little bit before we kind of jump into other areas. So Abdel, you started your career in Morocco and then eventually worked at Google's largest data center in Belgium before moving to Sweden. How did these international experiences shape your perspective on development, but cloud computing in generally? And how has this grown as you've spoken at all these events and conferences and had all this exposure to all these other communities?
Sure. So the first thing I think is that it's made my English way better than it used to be 11 years ago. I grew up in Morocco. We speak Arabic and English, so that's the predominant languages. And I spoke English at a very young age, but with traveling and living in different places, you get to practice and become better at it. So that's the first thing. One interesting difference that I've noticed in these three places I lived in and all the places that I spoke at and been to and conferences I attended, the culture, the way people behave and act and interact with each other impact heavily how people work and behave in the workplace, right? A very funny, interesting thing I could probably share is, in most of the Western world, like US, Europe, there is this thing of work-life balance, don't mix work and life. Your friends at work are your friends at work, and your friends at home are your friends at home, or whatever. That doesn't exist in Morocco. That's not a thing we believe in. In my culture, your friends are your friends. It doesn't really matter. And your friends will include the person who guard your car when you park it during the night, your coworkers, the person who prepare coffee in your office, and your boss. It's all one mixed up big lump of things, because we believe in relationships, and relationships are important in my culture, right? And that's also kind of impact the way you work with each other, right? I remember when I started my career back in Morocco, not verbally fighting, but shouting and kind of disagreeing in a very loud voice is something that is quite normal in the workplace. It happened all the time. When I moved to Belgium, I've never heard anybody shout. If somebody shouts at me at my workplace, I would just quit, or I would escalate to HR, right?
Yeah.
I don't want people to take it wrong. I'm not talking about verbal abuse. I'm talking generally, it's just people disagree in a very passionate, loud way. That's just a common thing in where I'm coming from, at least. So So to that, like in that perspective, it shaped my way of looking at the workplace, the work environment, the kind of things that people care about, generally speaking. Like meeting all sorts of personalities, all the way from people who are very passionate about what they're doing, to all the people who are, taking tech as it's something they do 8 to 5, and then after 5 it's something else. We tend to think that everybody in tech is passionate and geek. That's not necessarily always the case, right? And so it's have been an interesting journey over the last, 12, 15 years to go through these like different places, and also kind of visit and speak in different parts of the world. It's been an interesting, enriching journey for sure.
So with all these experiences, obviously, if I'm in the workplace and someone's yelling at me, something has to be extreme for me to let that slide. Like that's not going to happen normally. Definitely the extremes for sure. So then let me ask you this, because obviously as a podcast host, obviously, especially for the Kubernetes podcast, obviously education to some degree is going to be a factor in what it is that you're doing, especially considering it's a very technical podcast. And, being a CNCF ambassador, I kind of see that being equally as well. I was really interested in this conversation because, at least for me, when it comes to like the average web developer, even at the senior level, it's like the extent of their cloud knowledge ranges to an S3 bucket. That's about it. And so I love making these subjects more accessible or more approachable, digestible, less intimidating for developers of all shapes and sizes and backgrounds. So I guess as you're a host, an educator, a cloud advocate, like, what are things that you're seeing that maybe from the web side of things, it's very approachable or very interesting for a developer to know this kind of information? What are things that you're seeing at least coming on the horizon, even for cloud devs, to be like, these are areas that you should be paying attention to? Obviously AI has come out. That's the big thing nowadays. But are there certain things that you're seeing that like this is industry noticeable changes that people should be aware of?
Sure. So, like on the first portion of your question, the thing that like the thing you mentioned, like as depending on where do you sit on the abstraction layer in the tech stack, cloud might be something that you will be diving into very heavily if you're a C++ developer, because that's kind of low level ish, and or it's like, as you said, like it's an S3 bucket, and then you don't have to worry too much about it. The way I like to describe this always is that it always fundamentally boils to 3 main components. There is always compute, storage, and network somewhere, right? That's like, it doesn't really matter where those files are served from, where those CSS, JavaScript, like pictures, files, HTML files are coming from. There is always a server serving you these things. Like, it doesn't really, like, even if you're using S3 is servers, right? And the way I like to describe that is, I always think about it is it's a sort of like a pendulum that like swings back and forth through the stack, and you get to like stop that object swinging at a certain level. Either you stop it very high up where you don't have to worry too much about how cloud works, and that's your Versal kind of hierarchy kind of environments where you don't have to worry, right? Like, you have a command line, you write some code, you write a single command line, and it just works, right? Like, maps your domain behind the scene, does all that stuff. Yeah, there is, of course, a server. There is some storage somewhere. There is a database. There is some network, but it's none of your problems, right? Then if you swing that all the way back to the other side, then you are diving all the way deep into configuring your own server with SSH and, doing your own things and your own security and your own load balancers and all that. To me, at least, fun stuff. I don't know if it's fun to a lot of people, right? So I think as long as people are able to understand these fundamentals, right? Able to understand that there is always a server somewhere, there is always some storage and some networking somewhere, then, like, it doesn't matter what your level of interest or what are the things that you have to care about, you will at least be equipped with some basic knowledge that allows you to understand how things works, and most crucially, when things doesn't work, why they don't work, right? Because let's face it, like, as technologists, generally speaking, I don't like to use the word developers because I believe that the people in the technology domain are not always developers. I like to call them people at the keyboard, or technical practitioners is a term that a lot of people like to use to kind of like encapsulate all the like the disciplines, if you want. Like you would spend probably as much time troubleshooting problems as you are spending time building stuff, right? And if you are not doing, or you're not spending time troubleshooting problems, you're probably doing something super basic, like not complex enough, or not. I don't want to use the word important, not complex enough, right? Which is fine. There is one exception to that rule, which is always the joke I make. It's always DNS, right? Like DNS will always be a problem for a lot of people, and it doesn't matter really how much time you spend on it. It will always be an issue. But so taking this approach to like break down the complex concepts into like the basic fundamentals have always been my approach, generally speaking. I've done some teaching back in my days. I've always told people, like, think about it as these basic fundamentals and build up from there, right? So that's essentially the approach I try to take. Now, the podcast itself is a little bit kind of more niche, if you want, right? Kubernetes is quite niche as a tool. It's not built for developers, for sure. It's not built for everyone. And it's hard when you are doing an audio podcast like ours to explain this like super complex topics, because we don't do video, we only do audio, so we don't have the power of being able to like share, a slide or a diagram or whatever. So that's the first part of the question. The second part, like the trends, it's what we were discussing before. Like a lot of people, like things are getting a little bit blurry nowadays, right? So it used to be super clear where the boundaries of front end and back end kind of lay down, right? Like you have a back end, it exposes an API. You have a front end that calls that API. Node.js is probably one of these frameworks that is already blurring the combination of these two things. Like, where does actually backend and frontend start when you work with something like Node.js? But like that's just maybe an exception to the rule, let's say. But let's take an example of like WebAssembly, right? WebAssembly is this piece of technology where, is it frontend? Is it backend? Is it both? Is it none of them? I would argue it's all of them. It's probably the closest we're going to get to write once, run everywhere. And by everywhere, I really mean everywhere, including mobile, including in browser, including on edge, including pretty much anywhere you need to run code. And so this is probably one of the, I would call it a trend. It's something that was kind of buzzing about 2 years ago, and it sort of like died down a little bit last year. We don't hear about it as much, but now it's picking up back again. And the example I gave you earlier was the Dagger, which is this like new CI/CD thing that the founder of Docker have built. They just published an article where they rewrote all of their system, including their front end and back end, in WebAssembly, written in Go, right? So they write code in Go, compile it into WebAssembly. So that's one of these technologies which I like. Beside Dagger as an example, which put it into production, I haven't seen much else going full on, kind of betting on the technology and just like using it exclusively yet. But I think it's something that we're gonna start seeing more and more as we go forward.
We'll get back to the conversation in a second. This episode is sponsored by This.Labs, trusted experts in modern web development and consulting. In today's fast-paced tech world, scaling your development teams and bringing innovative ideas to life can be challenging. This is where This.Labs comes in. We specialize in amplifying your technical capabilities, whether it's expanding your dev team with seasoned professionals or streamlining your project's journey from ideation to deployment. Our approach is personalized and collaborative. We take the time to understand your unique business needs and craft tailored solutions that not only meet but exceed your expectations. With a proven track record of driving innovation and delivering results, we empower businesses to stay ahead of the curve and maximize their ROI. Visit this.co to discover how This.Labs can transform your vision into reality. A big thank you to This.Labs for sponsoring this episode and for their unwavering commitment to advancing the developer community. Now back to that. So, we kind of touched on multiple areas there, right? And so I guess let me jump into one area in particular, and then maybe we can kind of hit on the other ones, if that kind of makes sense.
Yep.
And so, obviously, me coming from majority of my experience is within the web development frame, whether it's backend, front end. I wrote Go for 2.5 years, and everything else has pretty much been primarily Java, and then of course like front end tooling like Angular and React. So I guess my question is, obviously there's a lot of buzz, especially now more than ever, with AI, and especially in terms of like front end development, back end development. In regards to cloud and distributed systems, is there like some influence happening right now in regards to AI? Is there any of the nervousness around what could be potentially happening to developer jobs within this sector, as much of the fear mongering has definitely been regarding like the front end or back end side of development? Oh, you see, already smiling. So, so my question is, do you see similar things happening in these sectors? Is this something that's top of mind for a lot of developers on the cloud side? Like what are some of the conversations looking like?
So I will start by trying to put everybody's mind at ease a little bit in terms of like the question, like, is AI going to take my job, right? The way I like to answer this is very simple. Like to be able to utilize an AI tool to its full potential as a developer, you need to know how to use it. You need to know how to ask it the right questions so it can give you the right answers. And here I'm talking about beyond Hello World. Anybody can ask ChatGPT, give me a Hello World example in Go, right? And you will get that. Getting it to give you an answer that is useful is a different story, right? And the closest analogy I have to this is if you take somebody who have never been to an airplane, even if you give them an airplane with autopilot, they wouldn't know how to fly it. Because if you don't know how to press the right buttons in the right order, you wouldn't know how to utilize it, right? So you have to have some sort of basic knowledge to start with. And I would say even like some sort of intermediary knowledge, not even basic, right? Like some sort of basic understanding. Because the reality is that if you are going to ask the AI to give you something, it's going to spit back code at you. And that code might work. And if it works, good for you. But if it doesn't work, you have to troubleshoot it, right? So, yeah. And like sometimes, like I've used most of them. I used Copilot. I've used our thing, Gemini. I've used Cursor as well. I'm actually experimenting with Cursor quite a bit. It's a pretty cool tool, but you really need to know what you're doing. You really need to know what kind of questions you're asking and what is the tool telling you back. And a lot of times, if you really don't know what you're doing, which I am learning Rust, I am still a beginner. I am using Cursor to write Rust. I ask Cursor to write Rust code for me, and sometimes it gives me back something. And I try to like prompt it to like get more details, and it sounds like, you know, that emoji of like raising your hands. They're like, I don't know. It's just like two clueless people, like well, one clueless person and one clueless AI. Like no one knows what's going on, right? So that's like kind of the answer to this question of like, you know, the debate that like, is this gonna take us our job? Now, with that in mind, I think that it's going to for sure take away certain jobs. That's gonna happen. Whether we like it or not, there is still a huge part of our industry, which is people doing very basic pages, very basic web pages, like marketing web pages. Like just stick a bunch of pictures, bunch of HTML and CSS into, if you are lucky, a modern accelerated web page kind of thing. And then, you know, put that on a server, put it behind the domain, and just publish it. That's gonna be super. I mean, this is not something that we have been like. This is something that we didn't have to wait for AI to replace. Like Squarespace and Wix have already replaced this kind of things. Like you don't really need to have a web developer today to like put together not even a single page, like a bunch of pages with your own domain to sell a book or sell recipes, or, you know, like if you listen to any YouTuber doing anything today, they're all sponsored by Squarespace, right? They're all using that. And that's not even AI. And another good example is Canva. Recently, they added Canva AI, right? And there was also this, Canva AI is going to take away Photoshop, people doing kind of design jobs. It's going to be taking away some design jobs, right? Not all of them, but probably some of them, the basic ones, like the most like, you know, entry level kind of tasks If we can automate them, then we don't need people to do this, and we can be more efficient in doing that. Now, I'm gonna go into this even if it was not part of the question. Like, where does people go from here, right? Especially if you are listening to us and you're new to this, like you're just coming out of university, or you're just picking up you're like picking up code, learning, kind of trying to break into it. I think where it will become like challenging for a lot of people is if you don't have any added value. If you're not able to sell yourself with an added value to whoever is willing to either buy your services or employ you, you will probably become like, if you are like the majority of the other people, like the majority of the people in the market, it will be very hard for people to find jobs going forward. It's already quite tight. The tech industry is quite tight these days, and it's gonna be even tighter. Now, the only thing I want to say, before I stop talking, is I want, like, we really need to move away from the flashy titles of, oh, we're gonna fire 10,000 people because of AI. That's all like wishy-washy kind of thing, CEO kind of level discussions. That has nothing to do with reality. So don't get like intimidated by the titles. I think like people have to be sometimes realistic and pragmatic about these kind of things.
Yeah, I will definitely say when it comes to that, I often think of shareholders, and like they're just trying to appease shareholders with certain moves like that. But one other thing I would also say too is, like, pre-pandemic, there were companies that were laying people off for performance issues, PIPs, etc., house cleaning every now and again. It's kind of the norm when it comes to these larger organizations. But I think because of the market that we're in, even when they do those same actions now, it seems more impactful or more detrimental to the development community, since it feels like, oh, we haven't even recovered from the last layoffs, and here's another round, even though maybe perhaps these were quote unquote low performers compared to what they were looking for. It still seems detrimental in that regard. But I guess, like, from my perspective, I'm trying to see on the AI side in regards to like cloud tooling, is there some level of automation that's happening now that's probably more impactful than probably what was happening previously, especially like when we're considering things like Kubernetes or service mesh, or even, for example, serverless, which is obviously a big thing going on right now. Is this seeing any kind of impact from your perspective?
For sure. And the impact is, for now, visible in I think two main areas. One of them is helping people navigate cloud environments. Cloud environments have only gotten more complex over time. I started working on Google Cloud about 6 years ago, and even now, myself being a Google Cloud expert, quotes on quotes, for 6 years, I still get lost in the documentation because it's getting complex, and things are, and terminology, and the enemy of the tech industry is naming. The more we name things, the more complex they become. I only have sympathy and empathy for people doing AWS because that thing have existed for like 20 years and it's a behemoth at this point. so I feel for the people who have to navigate the console, the documentation, all that stuff, right? And this is the kind of things where AI could help, right? Making access to knowledge easier. Instead of like having to navigate through documentation for pages and pages and pages to finally read that like little nota bene in the bottom of like a doc that says, when you combine condition A, B, C, this wouldn't work. Maybe that's something that an AI could help you with, right? So we already have it on Google Cloud. I'm not advertising for cloud here, but like we have something called Cloud Assist, which is like a chat environment built into the console, and you can just ask it questions and it will point you directly to the documentation. So that's one of them. The second one is, like, it's interesting that you brought up serverless, because to me, serverless have always had this promise of the holy grail for developers, the easy path, the happy path, right? Go from code to URL in 2 steps, 3 steps, whatever that number is, right? Like Vercel is a good example, right? Like you start with some code and then you write or run a single command line and then you have an app deployed, right? So in that particular example, I don't really see where AI could make things easier. Maybe make it easier to troubleshoot performance problems. That could be something that would be interesting. Especially, and you folks are like way more experts on this than me, but I think troubleshooting web performance issues is particularly complex because you have to deal with device types, internet problems, bandwidth,
Regions of the world.
yeah, exactly. Agents of the world. That's a good word. Maybe being able to emulate all of these use cases and telling you how the perceived performance from a user perspective and pinpointing a particular part of your code base where that performance issue could be caused by, that could be interesting. Even in a serverless environment, I'm not like, the serverless part is that's going to be the easy part. Because once you deploy your app as a developer, your app is working. You want to go beyond. You want to make the experience good for all users, right? So that's something where it could be interesting. Or maybe helping people with privacy problems. Building a web app that has to today adhere to privacy regulations of different parts of the world, like the EU functions a little bit differently than the US, than other parts of the world, and geofencing and geo restrictions, all this stuff. That also could be something where AI could help. These are maybe the two kind of examples that I have from the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I think that there is a place for AI as an assistant, generally speaking, as something that you can use to help you achieve certain things. Because the reality of it is that we are, like, most developers today are building custom logic. Like, no one is building, like, if you are building standard logic, again, an AI can automate that, so we don't need you. Like, most people are building custom logic for their companies, for their businesses, or for the business they're working for. And therefore, you are the only one who understands how that logic should work, or what's the expected behavior.
Yeah, I want to say something. I think Adam has something that he wants to say after this, but in regards to that serverless comment, something has come out actually like last week that is pretty interesting from Vercel. As of the time of recording this, the episode that has come out right before this one is revolving around that announcement of Vercel Fluid Compute, where you can do multiple levels of concurrency for your functions and things like that. So you could have 3 or 4 functions running at the same time, especially because AI, especially with all these reasoning models, they're taking significantly longer to finally deliver responses. So instead of waiting 30, 40 seconds for one action to take place, you can have multiple running concurrently in order to get the best use of time, which they've also seen like an 85% reduction and a lot of like the serverless billing that is happening right now in regards to this. So that's pretty cool. But I'll defer to Adam now with the next comment that he wants to make.
So using AI to help navigate these serverless platforms is one thing. I'm curious if, at least on Google Cloud that you work on, are you all working on maybe some more meta serverless features that sort of put together smaller atomic-sized features to let you, to sort of give you that Heroku experience with a better sort of platform behind it? So like Fly.io or Render are the more modern versions of Heroku that I can think of. Sometimes those take you away from the reliable cloud platforms like AWS or Google Cloud. Are you guys, AWS seems anathema to building that sort of easy to use thing. Are you seeing anything better on the Google side where they just want to make it so that you can just push to a main branch in GitHub and then it just spits out a web app on some serverless, on some EC, whatever the Google equivalent of an EC2 box would be? Yeah,
not directly on Google Cloud, but Firebase have already announced something last year that there is this like app hosting on Firebase which supports Next.js and another framework. I'm trying to remember which one is it. It's essentially what you're describing, like an easy to use, happy path for developers, which then integrates and is scalable through the rest of Google Cloud, because Firebase and Google Cloud are kind of interconnected between each other, right? So one very simple example is Firebase for a very long time did not have a SQL database. It only had no SQL databases. And so now it does have a SQL database, which is just baked by or backed by Google SQL products behind the scene. Still accessible through the Firebase interface, which a lot of developers like because it's more simple than Google Cloud. But it gives you that like click to deploy kind of experience. I think the main difference, like the main thing that people have to keep in mind is that Google Cloud is trying to become or trying to be the like do it all kind of platform. So we are like, this is a comment or like a critic we get all the time, that people want us to be opinionated. It's very hard to do so. We can be opinionated up to a large extent to tell people you should do things this way. but we also want people to be aware that they have options to do things a different way. So we're trying to work more on those like integration points to make the communication between the services easier. So if you are deploying an app on, let's say, Google Cloud Run, which is our runtime environment, you can connect to SQL, NoSQL, Scalable, PubSub, whatever, easily, right? Without having to worry too much about how it works behind the scene. And that kind of like composability is the thing that we're trying to do with Google Cloud. Firebase, to me at least, remains the developer-friendly interface. And by getting these two things kind of more tightly integrated, then you can get best of both worlds if you want.
To that end, does the Firebase app that you deploy, does that actually run inside of Google Cloud's perimeter? So if you want to stand up like a Google Cloud Postgres box, you can hit it without any kind of latency going into your region?
Because it runs on top of Firebase runtime, which is just Cloud Run behind the scene. And so you can just connect it back to like an instance or to any other cloud service easily.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Easily Danny, and also without latency.
Yes, exactly. And to the point Danny brought up earlier about the fluid computing that Vercel have released or announced last week, they actually acknowledged that Cloud Run was the inspiration for that, because Cloud Run was one of the first platforms to enable that concurrent execution of it's not, but in the serverless offering of Google Cloud, allowing that like concurrent execution of functions to reduce some costs and make applications faster. So.
Okay, well, I've got a question. I guess, like from your perspective, a lot of subjects that you're touching on, but like, what are you currently geeking out about? Like, what is the thing that, like, if it's the weekend, you're trying to just geek out over something, what are you geeking out about these days?
I mean, like, this is a very good question. I am actually trying to get a little bit into more content creation personally. I've always been a big fan of this, like, content creators that create like short, straight to the point, easy to understand content, not gimmicky, not like, like tech people trying to become kind of Instagram influencers kind of thing, but more like short, easy to digest content. I mean, we can take a very, very stupid example, like, the last 3 weeks, the internet was all buzzing about DeepSeek. I want to like watch a 5-minute video to tell me what DeepSeek is all about and why are people like excited about it, and most importantly, like, are all the claims on the internet correct or not? I think that's sometimes what's missing from most content, because either people are building anti or for something, right? Like, it's either you're a pro or a con something. I want like more a balanced opinion, and I'm trying to see if I can be that person that will bring that into the content creation world, where I can go like, hey, this is what I think. This is what my research yielded, right? And the other thing is just really experimenting with all these, like, cursors, big one that I'm experimenting with quite a lot. Notebook LM for research, generally speaking, just allows me to compile like a bunch of sources and like get a summary of a specific topic is also something that I spend a bunch of time on. And this like just basically building content. I think that there is probably a space for balanced content that is not too too polarizing. For the tech specifically, I'm not talking about other topics, right?
Yeah, I can tell you this is like a topic I obsess over constantly. If you look, I've got pages and pages of, I'm big on like handwriting still. And so I always keep a book on my table. I have my whiteboard right there, and I'm constantly like plotting digestible ways to make intimidating subjects more approachable. And so I'm just constantly like sharing ideas, like going through ideas, iterations, and things like that. I've been writing more blog posts lately, now more than ever. But I want to experiment more with the blog post to video ratio to see like what I can do. But this is like something I'm constantly racking my mind around, because I've been making video content for years, especially like short stuff on like Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. YouTube needs more love from me, I'm not gonna lie. I neglect it a little bit too much, but this is something that, all right. And so I want to thank today's sponsors one last time. This.labs, dedicated to guiding companies through modernization and digital transformation journeys. This.labs is a tech consultancy that specializes in amplifying your technical capabilities, whether it's expanding your dev team with seasoned professionals or streamlining your project's journey from an ideation to deployment. We work with clients like Google, Microsoft, PayPal, and mid-sized organizations. Check us out at this.co. That is THISDOT.co. And that'll be a wrap. You can find me on social media at DThompsonDev pretty much everywhere on the internet. You can find Adam Rackis at Adam Rackis. And you can find Abdel at Board Abdel, or you can find him at any of the links in the show description or show notes below. Thank you all. We'll see you on the next one.